It shouldn't have happened.
She's bleeding like crazy.
It couldn't have happened.
What are you trying to kill us for?
But it did. It happened on the Macon County Line. Macon County Line. A true story you won't be able to forget.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're going to catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're going to make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Hi there, this is Jeff Markin.
And I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And you're listening to the American International Podcast. On this episode, we will be discussing Macon County Line from 1974.
Macon County Line was directed by Richard Compton, written by Max Baer Jr. and Richard Compton, and produced by Max Baer Jr. and Roger Camras.
Macon County Line stars Alan Vint as Chris Dixon, Jesse Vint as Wayne Dixon, Cheryl Waters as Jenny Scott, Max Baer Jr. as Deputy Reed Morgan, Geoffrey Lewis as Hamp, Joan Blackman as Carol Morgan,
Leif Garrett as Luke Morgan, James Gammon as Elisha Gibbons, Timothy Scott as Lon Hawkins, Sam Gilman as Deputy Bill, Doodles Weaver as Augie, and Emile Meyer as Gurney.
The film opens to the chords of The Chords singing Shaboom. We see a man and a woman exit a bar, and it sounds like the start of a joke.
But it's the start of a movie. A title graphic appears saying, "This story is true. Only the names and places have been changed." Another caption comes up that says, Louisiana, 1954.
The camera pans around, and we end up in what appears to be a small apartment.
If it's a room above the street, and in that room, some sex is being had.
So sex is being had.
Music plays as the male of the couple demands his partner move in a certain way. And we see another man, he's shirtless, he goes into a bathroom to wash up. And then the man having sex demands that his female partner bark like a dog.
The shirtless man in the other room yells out, "Hey, Chris, better hurry up before her old man gets here."
And then Chris, the man having sex, yells, "Come in!" And the woman is barking very loudly at this point.
The shirtless man looks out the window and he sees three men gathering outside, so he hurries in finishing getting dressed. He yells out, "You better get your exhaust pipe dressed, they're coming."
The three men that were outside come inside and they stealthily climb the stairs. The formerly shirtless man tells Chris that there's three men out there, and Chris finally starts to pay attention. He gets angry, he climbs off the woman and tries to grab all his clothes, which are strewn about. The woman lazily asks him to come back to bed. But the formerly shirtless man, who we'll find out is named Wayne, grabs the woman's purse and climbs out the window.
The other man, Chris, is stumbling around the room looking for his clothes, buck naked still. He finds what he's looking for, grabs his clothes, and hops out the window.
Still buck naked. He walks out into the balcony, leaps over it, and then the film freezes on his bare butt, and the title of the movie comes up, Macon County Line.
And the song has now changed to Jim Dandy to the Rescue.
Right, because now they're running away. One of the men coming up the stairs pokes his head out the window and yells, "You bastard."
So Chris and Wayne are on the run. They're running down an alley and they stop so Chris can finish getting dressed. And this is when Wayne checks out the take from the prostitute's purse and he says that they managed to get $6.
He thought he was worth more than that, but I guess not. They walk to the place where they left their car, but it's not there. One of the two wonders what happened to the car, and the other one explains that it probably got towed, pointing to the no parking sign.
So the duo has no choice but to walk to the impound yard, and they do this as the sun rises, while we get to hear the song Keep On Keepin' On by Vermeccia.
A lovely shot here as the boys stroll down a street. They attempt to get a ride, but they fail at that.
This gives the full opening credits a chance to roll during the sequence.
And the sun a chance to rise. They get to the impound lot and negotiate with the lot owner to get their car back. And poor Chris can't believe that in addition to paying the fee, he also has to pay a tax.
Yeah, the total is $21 including tax to get their car back. And this is pretty much going to wipe them out.
Yeah, it's 1954 money, so that's a lot. But they get their car, get the keys back, And then they drive off with Wayne almost falling out of the passenger side as they pull out of the impound lot.
And Vermedia's song continues.
They drive through scenic roadways and through the night. And then the next day we see them eating at a diner.
The music playing is Corina Corina.
Some good music in this movie.
And Wayne, in sunglasses, asks for directions to the restroom. He then asks for more coffee and another order of toast as he leaves.
As Wayne is walking to the restroom, a couple of cops walk in. Chris, who is sitting somewhere not with Wayne, ducks his head as they walk in.
In the restroom, Wayne notices a man sitting in an open toilet, but this isn't going to stop him from the work he has to do. Wayne works on opening the window. There's these metal blinds covering it, and he removes those one by one and then jumps out the window.
To the amusement of the guy sitting on the toilet seat reading his paper, he actually gets up and looks out the window.
And he waddles over and looks out the window and then waddles back to his seat to finish what he came in there to do.
Back in the restaurant, the cops are bantering with the customers. Chris decides it's time to leave. He goes to pay for his coffee. Once out the door, Wayne backs into view through the window, and we see Chris hopping into the car. The waitress also sees it and realizes she just got stiffed for Wayne's check and demands that the cops chase them.
The song Jim Dandy to the Rescue starts playing again.
That must be their theme song for when they're up to no good.
The police rush out to their vehicles as Wayne and Chris speed off, and the police try to pursue, but it appears that Wayne has tied one of those police cars to a pole and the other police car to that police car. So when they leave, one car doesn't go anywhere and the other drags part of the first car behind it.
It pulls off the whole front end of the car.
Chris and Wayne are celebrating their escape. Wayne says that he's almost tempted to turn around to go back just so he can see their faces.
Chris, who only had coffee because that's how much money they had, complains about being hungry, and Wayne offers Chris some toast from his pocket. Yum. Now we're at an abandoned service station where a young woman dressed in her Sunday best waits with some luggage. A man pulls up to her, opens the door, and tells her that he's going all the way to Dallas. She kicks his door closed from her seated position and says, "Well, you're going alone." He calls her a bitch and he drives off.
It's not too long before Chris and Wayne drive up to the same point. They pass the girl, but reverse the car back to her. One of them says, "Hi, sweet potato."
Hi, sweet potato.
Name's Jenny Scott, okay?
Okay.
I'm 20 years old.
Good.
And then Jenny apparently decides that these two are better for a ride than the other guy was. So she starts throwing her luggage in their back seat.
Yesterday I got picked up by this old Southern boy. Said I reminded him of his daughter. Screwed her when she was 14. Today this Cuban immigrant and his fat wife picked me up. He kept putting his hand on my leg. And all she could do was laugh about it. So what do you two got in mind?
Oh, we just want to put our hand on your leg, that's all.
So as the trio drives off, Chris is telling Jenny their life story. He says he was facing a judge who sentenced him to 3 years, and he could choose whether that be jail or military service, so he picked the service. And then Wayne re-enlisted so they could go in together, and now they have 2 weeks to kill before they have to go into the military.
So they're going to spend those 2 weeks catting around and having fun.
Jenny asks what Chris might have done to get those 3 years, and Chris says it was assault with a friendly weapon with the intent of doing bodily harm.
Yeah, he really said friendly. We checked. Wayne says that Chris is the troublemaker of the two, but Chris denies it. And I don't know that they ever say so, but they're brothers. They're not just friends. We haven't mentioned it yet, but I think we figured that out because they start talking about how it all started with their mom.
And as they're going on, Jenny keeps asking what Chris might have done to get those 3 years, but they're too involved with their own storytelling to answer that question.
Yeah, apparently they got in a fight with their mother who wanted a cut of their thievery money. Mom attacked Chris with a spike heel, and then the boys hit her. I don't think this is a real story because Chris says, every time we tell this story, it gets better and better. Jenny just laughs at that.
So now we cut to a gun shop. Deputy Reed Morgan is checking out a shotgun.
It's Jethro from the Beverly Hillbillies, Max Baer Jr., but obviously he's not playing Jethro.
He asks Gurney, the store owner, how much this particular shotgun is, and he says that it's $60, but with his discount, it'll be only $50.
He also asks, why do you need another gun? And Deputy Reed says that it's for Luke, his son. Gurney thinks that this might be too much gun for a 10-year-old boy, but Reed says that Luke can handle it.
Gurney can remember when Reed's daddy bought him his first gun, and Gurney could swear that Reed was older than Luke is now.
It's almost like saying that Reed is lying to him without actually saying it. They bargain a little over the payment. Reed wants to pay $10 now and the rest later, but Gurney insists that he give him $20 now. However, when Reed leaves, he predicts that he will be late paying the rest of it.
As he leaves, we do get a good look at the Confederate flag on the shoulder of his uniform.
Yep, this is the South, and it is 1954. We're back with Chris, Jenny, and Wayne. Their car is having some issues. They pull over by the side of the road. There's not really anywhere to pull over, but they just stop. Chris is driving, but Wayne wants to take over. And he also wants a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And here we see a man and his son walking along the road. Looks like they're going fishing because they're holding poles.
Yeah, they're walking Andy Griffith style.
And this is kind of important. We'll see why later.
So their car sputters past this couple going in the other direction, and the trio pulls into a place called Douglas Lubricant.
They finally made it to a service station. The mechanic who works there, his name is Hamp, is arguing with another customer who's named Augie. They're bartering for the payment and trying to figure out how best to, I guess, do this without cash.
They've been talking about trading tractor tires for a mare, and this negotiation has apparently been going on for several months.
Because now the mare is with foal.
So Augie tells Hamp that he's going to have to sweeten the pot.
Chris looks around and tells Jenny that if God was going to give the world an enema, right here is where he'd stick the hose. Augie and Hamp pause their negotiations for now, and Augie leaves. And then Hamp's wife, Ida, yells out the window, giving him grief for losing that deal with the mayor.
Hamp tells her that Augie's going to think about it and let them know on Sunday.
And Hamp is played by Geoffrey Lewis, who just does an absolutely awesome job with this role. He walks over to the boys and asks if they want to fill up, and they say, no, it's the fuel pump. Hamp looks under the hood and says they need to fix the catch on the fuel pump before driving it again.
Next, we see Deputy Reed pulling in front of his house. Inside, his wife Carol is in the kitchen, humming a tune while doing dishes. Reed comes inside and says he just came home to change his shirt and drop off the gun he had just purchased for his son.
He asks Carol for a beer while he's on duty and driving, but she doesn't get it for him. She just lays on the bed, trying to look as seductive as you possibly can with a kerchief on her head. Reed looks at her and shudders a little. He's very tempted, but he kisses her and leaves.
Back at the service station, Chris and Wayne discover that Hamp won't take a credit card. He only takes cash or credit, but he can't give them credit because he doesn't know them.
And they don't have enough cash. Hamp had told them that they really should get a new fuel pump, not repair the old one. But they don't have the money for it because it's going to be $27 with tax. And the boys only have $7 between them. Jenny has $3 that she offers them, but they tell her no.
Then Chris tells Wayne to get the gun. And Jenny says, "What gun?" Wayne goes over to the trunk and pulls out a .22 caliber rifle.
Wayne takes this gun and walks very slowly and deliberately towards Hamp. Hamp looks extremely nervous at this. But he shouldn't. This was just a fake out. They want to trade the gun and their $7 for the new fuel pump. But Hamp's not having it. He doesn't need a gun. Well, he doesn't need that kind of gun. If they had a shotgun, it would be different.
So this is a no-go for Hamp. But then Chris says that Hamp mentioned that there was that other fix. And Hamp says he can do a temporary fix that will take them about 20 miles and cost them about $5. They're headed west, and the nearest station is 40 to 45 miles away. They ask him to do the repair and say that they would like him to hurry so they can get to that service station before it gets dark. Hamp says it'll take a little while, and Chris asks for the restroom.
And this is a really funny scene while they're doing these negotiations. This is a real service station. It's not a set. And Geoffrey Lewis just plays this like such a pro. There's a main door to the building, and then there's the garage door and a door in between the two. And he's just wandering around kind of in and out of the frame. And finally he stops and talks. And then one of the boys comes up through that extra door behind him and startles him. And it's really funny, just the way they play it.
Yeah, the blocking for this sequence is incredible.
And from what we heard, it was kind of improvised basically by Lewis. And it's hilarious. So now everyone's going to the bathroom, separated by genders, of course. Jenny's in the ladies' room changing, freshening up. And the brothers do a little light comedy routine as they take a pee. Pretty cute scene.
Man, I sure hope he can fix that catch. I'd hate to get hung up in this place. Boy, you can say that again. Man, I sure hope he can fix that catch. I'd hate to get hung up in this place. Boo.
He says boo.
He said boo?
Yeah, he said boo. Then Chris asks Wayne what he thinks of Jenny.
What do you think of that girl?
Ah, she's all right.
Yeah, she is all right. Did you see how fast she came up with that money? She could have just left, you know.
What do you think, we're going to score with that broad?
And Chris says, "What's this we?"
She told me you have bad breath. We briefly cut away outside to see Deputy Reed driving up.
Then Chris goes to the ladies' room, knocks on the door. When Jenny comes out, he asks if she has an extra toothbrush, and of course she doesn't. But she does offer him her toothbrush. He says, well, that's okay as long as there's no food in it. He takes it, and then she remembers to give him her toothpaste as well. It's a very flirty scene. Deputy Reeve goes in the gas station cafe, startles Ida a little by sneaking up on her. Over at the whites-only restrooms, yes, that was the sign on the door, Chris and Wayne knock on the ladies' room door, asking if Jenny's ready, and she is. She comes out. Now she's dressed in a pencil skirt. She's walking to the car in front of them, swaying her hips seductively, as the boys look on in appreciation. And Wayne says, must be jelly, because jam don't shake like that. Now we're back with Reed and Ida in that cafe. A cafe worker serves Wayne a bottle of beer, and Reed gives Ida some grief about her weight loss journey.
Reed takes a look out the window as the characters of Lon and Elisha pull up. We haven't met them yet, but they are a couple of seedy-looking characters. But Reed seems to be more interested in the punk kids he sees sitting outside.
But Lon and Elisha don't know this, and they look very nervous. Hamp is filling up their tank, and they yell at him to hurry up.
Reed asks Ida how long those kids have been sitting out there, and she says about 15 minutes.
That's not very long. It's hardly loitering.
Hamp finishes filling up Lon and Elisha's tank, and they speed off.
Yeah, Elisha says, we don't need no cops.
He tells Lon that he should relax, and what he really needs is a beer.
They could have gone inside if it weren't for Reed. Back at the station, Reed goes outside. He's eyeing the boy's car, noting the Illinois license plate. He goes into the garage and chats with Hamp a bit.
They talk about things like tomorrow being the first day of hunting season, and Reed says that he's going over to Hood to pick up his son Luke from military school.
Luke just was made a lieutenant, and now he outranks his dad because his dad only made it to sergeant.
Hamp mentions that the kids outside need a new pump, but they don't have the money to pay for it. Hearing this, Reed does what he sees as his sworn duty as an officer of the law and goes out to harass Wayne and Chris and Jenny.
Yeah, that really lit something up in him. He asks for their story and finds out that they're from Chicago. Chris says they're just passing through and have to stay there till their car is fixed, but after that, they'll be moving on. Then he asks Reed if he has any power to hurry Hamp up. Then Reed asks for their identification, which they provide, and he wonders where they've been. Chris says New Orleans, where he was getting his physical, and Reed wants to know what he needed a physical for, and Chris says it's for the Army. He looks at Jenny's ID and asks her if she's from Dallas, and she says yes.
Then Reed asks if they have any money on them. He says they have to have $10 apiece or they'd be considered vagrants.
He asks the trio if they each have $10, and they all say yeah, and then he asks if they will show it to him, and Chris says he'd rather not.
Then Reed yells to Hamp to hurry with that catch so that these kids can get out of town. He says if they stay too long, they might grow to like it here, and Reed wouldn't like that at all.
And then he leaves with a nervous Chris, Wayne, and Jenny in his wake. Once in the car, he gets on the radio, gives their plate number to his dispatcher, see what they can find out.
The sun is setting and the streetlights are coming on. We see Wayne kind of strutting around outside, still at the service station.
I said he was kicking rocks.
And we see Chris and Jenny are cozying in together in the back seat of a car.
Jenny asks if Wayne's going to be okay, and Chris says that he thinks so, but it's just that we've been together for a long, long time.
Now we cut away to see Lon and Elisha driving around. Elisha points out a place nearby and says, hey, how about that place there? And Lon says it's as good a place as any, and they pull over.
As they get out of the car, Lon says, let's get it. That's a little scary. We get back to Chris and Jenny. They're now kissing in the backseat of that car.
And then we cut to the military school where Reed has arrived to pick up his son Luke.
He walks down a school hallway and goes into a classroom where a bunch of little soldiers are studying at a table. They stand at attention, and Reed says who he is and asks for his son, Lieutenant Luke Morgan. Luke is dismissed. He walks over to his dad and salutes him.
As the two of them walk down the hall toward the exit, Reed asks if Luke would like to go hunting with him tomorrow, but Luke promised some of the kids from Jeff Davis that he'd play baseball with them tomorrow.
Reed tries to guilt Luke into going hunting instead, but eventually he relents and lets Luke keep his promise to play the game with his friends. Luke invites his dad and mom to come watch him play, but Reed says that Luke's mom worries about him too much. She didn't even want him to go hunting.
As they head to the car, Luke yells goodbye to a few friends who are playing basketball outside the school, and Reed doesn't like what he sees.
Yeah, they're all black kids, and obviously Reed is wearing a Confederate patch on his arm, so we can see in his face that he doesn't approve of this.
So back at Reed Morgan's home, His wife Carol has fallen asleep watching a news program on the McCarthy hearings.
Yes, those McCarthy anti-American hearings. So we really have a sense of time and place now, don't we? Or at least time.
And Lon and Elisha have broken into the house and awaken her.
Lon sneaks up to Carol, puts his hand on her mouth, and shushes her. He tells her, be quiet. They're just going to take a few things. Lon points out Elisha, who's going through stuff in the kitchen.
Lon says he's going to take Carol to the back and tie her up just so she doesn't make any noise. And he takes her to the bedroom and sits her on the bed.
And we see Elisha in the kitchen. He pours himself a glass of milk and goes and sits in front of the television.
In the bedroom, Lon opens the closet, presumably to find something to tie up Carol with. He notices Reed's uniform shirt hanging on the door and has a flashback.
That shirt really triggers something in him. The flashback is of him kneeling on the ground in front of a headlight or spotlight, and two cops approach him on either side. He looks at Carol and looks around the room. He sees a family portrait of the three of them with Reed in his uniform. He asks Carol if her old man's a cop. She acknowledges that. Then he asks her how many times a week does her old man give it to her. Does he ask or does he take it? And then he approaches her with obvious ill intent. And we're not really sure what happens because thankfully it doesn't happen on camera. But while he's reliving this horrible flashback of being brutalized by the police, he is also doing something sexual, rape to Carol, or she's helping him. I don't know. I don't want to know. And then he finishes on or near Carol. It's really disgusting.
Yeah, it's very graphic without being graphic at all.
Right. So we know it's terrible, but we don't have to witness it.
Nearby, we see the Chrysler puttering out again, so apparently Hamp had successfully fixed it temporarily.
Chris complains that Hamp promised them 20 miles with the repaired fuel pump, but they've only gotten 10 miles of that. Jenny wakes up to the dying car, and they pull off. They have no other choice.
They continue to argue about their situation. Wayne says he might be able to fix it if he has the right tools, and Chris tells him that if he doesn't fix it, they're stuck. But they do agree to sleep on it and figure out in the morning what they're going to do.
Wayne calls dibs on the car, and Chris says, yeah, right. And Wayne says he's just kidding. They need to go look for a place to sleep. They get out of the car, and they find what looks like a barn. Wayne rolls out his blanket and lays down on the floor.
Then we cut to Lon and Alicia's car starting up and leaving. And as they pull out, we see it's very near where the Chrysler broke down.
Yeah, it's just at the end of Deputy Morgan's driveway. In the barn, Wayne is smoking as Chris makes a nest for himself and Jenny. They suggest putting a note on the car in case the sheriff drives past. They have no idea that they're so near to his house, but they're still afraid of him.
Wayne says he'll do it. He gathers his bedroll and tells them that he's just going to go sleep in the car.
Jenny wonders why he's so grumpy, and Chris says probably because there's only one girl, and Jenny frowns.
And Wayne climbs into the car and prepares for his night of restful bliss.
And Chris and Jenny also snuggle in their little love nest. Chris asks Jenny why she's going to Dallas, and, well, Jenny doesn't tell him, but she does tell him a story about how she was working in a bar and she was underage. Her roommate was the manager's girlfriend, and the manager made a pass at her, and the roommate found out, and Chris interrupts her and says, you never did tell us why you were going to Dallas. And she frowns and pouts and says, does it matter? He says no.
Deputy Reed is driving Luke home, and he's still thinking about the boys that he saw playing basketball outside the school, and he asks Luke about them. Luke explains that he had some free time after study hall one day, and he went out to use the basketball court, and there they were. They picked teams, and his team has the best record. He also said that the school doesn't seem to want them there, and drives them off sometimes.
Reed, still looking ahead at the road, says, you know how in school you have rules and laws that you have to follow? And Luke says, like you have rules to follow? Reed says, right. He hesitates a little bit, and then Reed says that at Sutter, the name of the school, they don't take blacks, not because they don't have the money. They just don't take them. Luke doesn't think that's right.
The school feels that blacks should go to school with other blacks and whites should go with other whites. Just seems to make things a whole lot easier. Your mom and I feel the same way.
Does that mean I can't play basketball anymore?
I wish you wouldn't. Okay.
Okay.
And they exchange a hug.
Now back in some romantically lit part of the barn, Jenny has found a trough of water, and she undresses to get into it. Chris notices this and joins her, and then they sex their way through a montage.
They spin around in the trough while piano music with strings plays on the soundtrack.
Yes, this goes on for some time, and it seems to jump back and forth between them in the trough and them having sex on the hay. And
yeah, at one point, it appears they dry off and then get back in.
I think it's just some creative editing, or else they were at it for a really long time and they had to wash off. But eventually we see them falling asleep in each other's arms, tucked in the same sleeping bag on the straw.
Now we go back to Elisha and Lon, who are still driving around, and two deputies see their car without taillights and pull them over.
Yeah, their intent is just to tell them about the taillight. Perfectly innocent, right?
Lon says that they won't be able to outrun them and tells Elisha to pull over.
Elisha, who's driving, sees Lon go for something, and Elisha tells Lon, "Don't you do it. Don't fall apart. Keep your mouth shut."
The deputy comes up to the car, knocks on the window, and tells them that he noticed their taillight was out. He said there's a service station about 6 miles down the highway, and then the other deputy notices a rifle and radio in the back seat. And when he mentions this, Lon reveals the handgun he'd been hiding in the shadows and shoots the deputy twice. The deputy falls forward and slams his head into the side of the car as Elisha puts the pedal to the metal and speeds off.
The first cop, this is Deputy Bill, opens fire on the car as it speeds away. He then runs to his car and calls into the station. It's a code 10. He's in pursuit of a late model Studebaker headed north on Turner Road near Junction 109. The dispatcher hears that and sends all available units in that direction. And the chase begins.
So with Deputy Bill chasing Lon and Elisha, their Studebaker crashes. Somehow it appears to miss a truck, but it stops. Deputy Bill crashes into them, and unfortunately, no explosions happen.
No, because we're out of this scene now, and we're back with Luke and Reed. Luke is asleep on Reed's shoulder, and he's having a dream. In this dream, he and his dad are pheasant hunting. They both have rifles. When they spot a bird, Reed motions for Luke to take the shot, but Luke can't or won't, so Reed has to, and he literally kills that bird. And then still in the dream, Reed looks at Luke a little disgusted as Luke hangs his head in shame.
Yep, Luke is a big disappointment to his father. And then back in the car, Reed awakens Luke.
Apparently Luke had been making some noise, and Reed woke him up just to make sure he was okay.
Now we're at the police station, and Elisha and Lon's attorney has arrived to speak with them, but Deputy Bill isn't ready for that. He says that they killed his partner, and he wants some alone time with them first.
Yeah, his partner had a wife and kids, but the public defender says that the suspects are entitled to a lawyer. But Deputy Bill gets into their holding room first, shuts the door on the public defender, and has the officer inside uncuff the two.
He slams some papers on the table and says, "Sign these papers." And Lon and Elisha just look at him.
Elisha says what for, and Deputy Bill says that they're confessions. And Lon says he's not going to sign that. Elisha says he wants to talk to the public defender. He knows what his rights are.
Bill says that he doesn't have any rights as far as he's concerned, and then Elisha starts to cry.
And Lon repeats that he's not going to sign. Deputy Bill demands that they put their hands on the table, palms down. And then Bill asks Lon if he's right or left-handed. Lon says he's right-handed, and Deputy Bill says, "You sign it, or you're going to be left-handed immediately."
Elisha is sobbing this entire time.
And Lon's trying to stall, but then the scene cuts to outside of the interrogation room where the public defender is waiting. There's silence, and then a gun goes off as a man screams.
Now we cut to Wayne sleeping in the car as Reed and Luke return home. They pass the car as they pull into their driveway.
But Deputy Reed doesn't take much notice of it. He tells Luke to get his suitcase and hurry inside because he's got a surprise for him.
Does he ever?
Boy, does he. Little Luke brings his suitcase up the walk, but before he can get in the house, Reed hurries out. He tells Luke to wait right there and to don't go anywhere. And then he rushes back outside.
Luke doesn't listen. He goes inside and says, "Mom?" As Reed is walking toward the car parked in the street, he hears Luke screaming from inside the house. The screams awaken Wayne, and he jumps out of the car. Reed sees him and takes a shot at him before running back inside to take care of his son.
Chris wakes up in the barn. He's also heard the shot, and he yells at Jenny to get up and get dressed.
Inside the house, Reed finds Luke hugging his mother's dead, bloodied body.
Ugh.
Reed grabs him, takes him outside, and slaps him silly, telling him to shut up.
Well, Luke's hysterical, and he tries to get him to be quiet, and he slaps him 2 times. Then he drags Luke with him as he runs to his car.
Wayne goes back to the barn to get Chris and Jenny. He tells them that the sheriff's gone crazy and shot at him.
Now Reed is in his car with Luke. They speed off. Reed speeds off and calls for an ambulance to come to his house.
Back at the police station, Deputy Bill asks what all this junk is in the office. The dispatcher says it's evidence taken from the suspect's car. What the audience knows is that this is the merchandise taken from Deputy Reed Morgan's house. Bill says to check the registration on the television and to get back with him with any information that turns up.
And then the dispatcher says what she's been wanting to say all this time. She tells him that Reed called in, asked for an ambulance to be sent to his house, and then he turned off the radio. She can't get him back, and no one answers when she calls his home. Bill asks when this happened, and the dispatcher says 5 minutes ago, and that something is very wrong, and that someone ought to go. Bill tells the dispatcher to keep trying the radio, and tells policewoman Annie to start calling on the phone.
Bill can go check out Reed's house because he may or may not have just shot a guy, but either way, the police station is probably not the best place for him to be hanging out.
Not right now. Wayne, Chris, and Jenny are on foot now, running down towards, looks like marshland, and they're pursued by Reed.
They hide behind a crane, and Reed takes a shot at them with his shotgun. He misses, so he starts running after them again, with Luke trailing behind.
They have to cross this large pipe that serves as a makeshift bridge, and it's very delicate stepping. Deputy Bill arrives at the Reed house. The ambulance is there. He goes in and makes the two white-clad attendants stop the gurney they're pushing. He looks at the body under the sheet and says, "Oh my God."
Now Chris, Wayne, and Jenny are running through the brush. Jenny falls. Chris and Wayne help her up. And Reed and Luke are still in pursuit.
Yep, with Luke following Reed. Back at the house, Bill is on the porch. He finds Luke's hat. So now he knows Reed and Luke have been there, and they saw that Carol had been killed. He goes to his car and calls the dispatcher, whose name is Terry, asks that a car be sent right out there right away because Reed's wife was murdered. You wouldn't believe it.
Reed is still after the trio, and he's calling for Luke to try to keep up with him. And this is when Deputy Bill notices the Chrysler parked outside the house, and he stops to investigate that. But a shot rings out and draws his attention.
And now everyone who's running is running down a hill, and it's tricky going. They get to a dock, start to cross, and Reed fires one more time. He hits a pole, and a bit of the shot hits Jenny, knocking her into the water.
Deputy Bill is calling for backup to come to the levee road near Reed's house.
Wayne has that rifle that we saw in their car previously, and he's firing back.
He's doing this as Chris is pulling Jenny from the water.
Deputy Bill stops near Reed's parked car and calls for them, and then he runs in that direction.
Now Chris and Wayne and Jenny have taken refuge in a houseboat at the end of the dock. Jenny is bleeding quite a bit.
She got hit in the ear.
And Chris is tending to her while Wayne is looking out the window, shotgun at the ready, but it's really quiet.
He calls out to Reed, saying that he's a crazy SOB, and why are you trying to kill us? We haven't done anything.
Man.
But there's no answer, and looking out the window, we can't see anything.
Chris is going to try to hotwire the boat, but there's a metal plate covering the ignition, and he can't get to the wires.
Chris says that something horrible has happened, and he, Reed, thinks that we did it. Then Chris goes out to shout at him. He says that we have a girl who's hurt, and she needs help. And he repeats that they didn't do anything, but there's still no answer.
He then says he doesn't want to be a sitting duck on this houseboat, and that he saw an outboard about 50 yards away. If he can get to it and get it started, then they could at least get to the other side of the river.
Wayne asks how he's going to get there without getting shot, and Chris says that he can swim. But Wayne asks, can you swim with this? And he hands him the rifle.
Wayne's insisting that Chris take the gun with him. Chris tells him that as soon as they hear the outboard start up to get outside and be ready to jump in. So Chris gets in the water and starts wading to the outboard, holding the gun over his head while Wayne and Jenny silently wait.
We're back with Deputy Bill. He's still searching for Reed. And then we see that Chris has made it to the boat and he climbs in. And then we get the point of view of someone who's going through the bushes towards him. Chris tries to start the motor, but it's not cooperating. And then he sees someone looking at him. He stops. And inside the boat, Jenny and Chris note the silence.
Then the silence is broken by the sound of a gunshot. Wayne calls out, "Chris, are you all right?" But no answer. Wayne and Jenny continue to listen to the silence. Then they hear footsteps coming down the dock.
And then they hear it on the boat. There's someone there. Hoping that it's Chris, they call out to him, but there's no answer. And then very slowly, the door to the cabin they're in opens. And they look on, scared, but they're not doing any evasive maneuvers.
And then suddenly, Wayne and Jenny are both shot in the chest in very slow motion.
We can't tell if there's one shot or two here, but Wayne and Jenny, who are not standing that near to each other, are both taken down. Jenny falls on a couch and Wayne just falls on the floor.
Deputy Bill is still out looking for Reed, and he does find him. He finds Reed laying dead, somehow under a tree.
Yeah, he's wedged between two tree trunks. he's dead, but we don't see any evidence that he's been shot. And we're not sure if that gunshot that we just heard got him or not. Bill's there for a minute, but then he moves on because we start to hear a gun cocking over and over again. Now, this is a 50-year-old movie, but it does have a twist ending. So if you don't want to know what the twist ending is, don't listen.
Bill heads down the dock and to the houseboat, and there he finds Luke standing there still cocking the gun, staring at the bodies in the houseboat. Bill takes the gun and tells Luke everything is going to be okay. And just then Chris returns, sees that his brother has been killed, and Luke cries into Deputy Bill's shirt.
There's no one comforting Chris. And then we fade to Chris. He's at the repair shop. He's sitting in his car. He's getting it back finally. And he's not alone. The whole town seems to be assembled there. We see Deputy Bill, Annie the policewoman, Ida, Hamp's wife, Gurney, the gun guy. They're all standing around looking at him.
He starts up the car and drives off.
Which is hard because his arm's in a sling. So obviously he was the one that got shot.
As he does this, the text comes on the screen. On March 26, 1961, after one retrial and 2 stays of execution, Lon Hawkins and Elisha Gibbons were executed in the electric chair for the murders of Deputy Ray Devon and Mrs. Carol Morgan. On September 7, 1973, Luke Morgan celebrated his 29th birthday in a mental hospital in Tennessee, where he is expected to spend the rest of his natural life.
This is all over Chris driving away.
And the Bobby Gentry song, Another Day, Another Time.
And we see one more font that says Chris Dixon is now a Master Sergeant in the U.S. Air Force and is stationed in Hawaii with his wife and 3 children. So I guess he gets a happy ending. And then as he's driving towards the horizon, we see that father and son, the pair who are fishing, returning.
Andy Griffith style.
Yeah, Andy Griffith style. And then over the credits, the entire song Another Place, Another Time plays out. And that's the end.
Before we take our break, let's go back a few minutes and go over the incidents that happened at the end of this film. Because there's some confusion, I think, in interpreting what happened.
Yeah, we argued about it. Well, we didn't argue about it. We were trying to figure out how Reed died. Because there's really no wound on him. The last gunshot we heard was the one that struck Chris.
And it looks like he's wedged between a tree. So
yeah, it's almost one of those locked room mysteries where there's no way he could be dead, and yet he's dead.
I don't know if we're supposed to assume that Luke killed his father for some reason, but I did go back and watch the last 20 minutes of this morning. And here's what I discovered. When Wayne is shooting back at Reed, Reed is in an area, he's kind of stumbling around, and it looks like the same area where his body is found. So maybe Wayne hit him, but we don't see evidence of a gunshot. But that seems the most logical explanation because there's no shots after that except for the one that hits Chris. There's no yelling. That's when it's quiet. Nothing happens.
That makes sense. It doesn't seem like they had a really good vantage point from the houseboat to take a shot that would get up into the woods and kill Reed. But if that's not the answer, then I don't know what it is.
I think that's a more logical answer than Luke going ballistic at that point and killing his father.
Yeah, with his bare hands, with the butt of a gun. Who knows? Maybe he was shot in the back of the head, though, because we see when he's lying down, he's on his back. So maybe Luke shot him in the back of the head and we just didn't hear the shot.
Did Luke even have a gun?
Of course Luke had a gun. He killed
Jenny
and
I
Wayne.
thought he took his father's gun at that point. I thought that was his father's gun that he took.
Maybe that is it. I don't know.
So I think that's the most logical explanation is that Wayne is a better shot than he gave him credit for.
But if he did shoot Reed, where did the shot land? Because the movie didn't show us any blood. And they showed blood on Jenny. And they showed blood on Chris. So it's not like they weren't going to make a wound where a wound should be.
I think if it was obvious, that would have given it away because there were no other shots fired.
Right. So maybe he got hit in the back and then he fell on his back. But why would he be facing away? It's a conundrum. As with a lot of things in this movie, we just kind of have to go with it.
Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we are discussing Macon County Line from 1974.
I couldn't find a whole lot of information on the production of this movie. However, I found a site that listed a lot of news items that were relevant to this film. For example, an April 27th, 1973 issue of Daily Variety announced that Carolyn Steller and her son Leif Garrett were cast to play the mother and son in this film, but Steller didn't remain with the project, as we know.
A June 4th, 1973 box office news item reported that Alan Vint, Geoffrey Lewis, Cheryl Waters, and Timothy Scott were added to the cast, and the film was set for production in California, even though the incidents depicted in the picture would be set in Macon County, Tennessee. Tennessee?
Or Texas. We're not sure. That's another thing. We weren't sure about where we're supposed to be.
So box office also had difficulty trying to figure out the geography of this movie.
That was pre-production. Maybe they changed it during production.
Writer-director Richard Compton and writer-producer Max Baer based their screenplay on what they said were the real-life murder of a woman and her rural community's retribution against 3 young people who were falsely accused of the crime.
December 7th, 1973, Daily Variety article noted that Max Baer Jr., who was the son of champion boxer Max Baer, and who was also widely known for his role of Jethro Bodine on the hit television series The Beverly Hillbillies, financed the $500,000 budget entirely on his own, though he also got a little help from his golfing buddies. One of Baer's buddies, real estate agent Roger Camras, was credited as the executive producer for the film, and he played the role in the film of the man in the car who tries to pick up Jenny at the gas station.
Director Richard Compton, who also co-wrote the script, said in the director's commentary of the movie that he wanted to set the movie in the 1950s because he loved the automobiles of the era, and that he thought the Vint brothers had a 1950s look. The production team licensed the footage of the McCarthy hearings, that is playing on the Morgan's TV just before Carol is surprised by the burglars, to add to the authenticity of the time period. However, there was at least one anachronism. The dishwasher in Carol Morgan's kitchen shouldn't have been there.
Compton's director of photography, Daniel LaCombra, helped save the production a lot of money by making use of natural or available light in many of the scenes, rather than renting a generator and rigging up production lights. On that same director's commentary, Compton said that he was really pleased with the results. The entire film was also shot in a 5-square-mile area of Sacramento, California, with the location carefully chosen to look like it could be Southern in origin.
Compton and Baer never agreed on what Jenny's mysterious backstory would be, and it is never divulged in the film. But Compton said he thought that she was probably escaping a bad marriage.
And at least one animal was harmed in the making of this movie. Like I said, during that hunting scene, Max Baer really did shoot and kill the bird, R.I.P. bird. And Max Baer, who never smoked anything, insisted that his character be a smoker, which is why there are a couple of scenes of him awkwardly pretending to smoke.
The houseboat scene was inspired by the original Cape Fear film starring Robert Mitchum. Compton cited the movie as a major influence on his work and his life.
According to Daily Variety, Baer screened an answer print of the film for industry insiders before he negotiated for its distribution, and it received widespread acclaim. Impressed by the picture, filmmaker Howard Hawks offered Baer financial assistance and committed himself to working with Baer on his second effort, not this one.
On March 7, 1974, The Hollywood Reporter announced that AIP was set to distribute the film in the Western Hemisphere. The news item noted that the theme song, Another Time, Another Place, written and performed by Bobby Gentry, would be released as a single as well as part of a soundtrack album. And an interesting side note, in 1974, Tom Laughlin had re-released his films Born Losers and Billy Jack to drive up anticipation for his upcoming film The Trial of Billy Jack, which would be released toward the end of that year. And these films were distributed en masse, with hundreds of prints being struck and distributed at once. This method can bring a larger upfront sum of the profits rather than a steady stream over time as the films are distributed from city to city. Sam Arkoff took note of this and decided to experiment with this method of distribution, and Macon County Line seemed like a good guinea pig for this. The problem was the cost. To strike the prints necessary would come at a cost of about $250,000, which Sam Arkoff was not about to cover himself. So he reached out to Max Baer and Roger Camras and said that if he could take money off the top of the profits, he would give the film mass distribution. This would cost Baer and Camras about $75,000 initially, but the gamble did pay off, and distributing the film through this method ended up generating around an extra $9 million in film rentals.
Wow. According to Daily Variety, Baer was inspired to develop the script after reading a newspaper story about a kid's birthday. Not sure how that tracks, but then he formed his own production company to finance the project. He had recently walked off the set of an independent production filming in the South, disgruntled by the producer-director's incompetence, and convinced that he could do it better. Baer allegedly wrote the film on the back of scripts during breaks filming the Beverly Hillbillies. And as stated in Daily Variety, Baer couldn't remember the name of the film and claimed that it would never be finished. However, in October of 1977, Variety reported that Baer and AIP were being sued by Midas Productions, who claimed that Macon County Line was a reworked version of their unreleased film, Redneck America, Love It, or ... Variety stated that Baer played a deputy sheriff in that film but quit after a few days on location. So, is that the same movie? Maybe not, because in 1977, a federal judge ruled against Midas, claiming that the two films were distinct enough to override charges of copyright infringement.
Macon County Line is docudrama in tone, And although it was presented as a true story to attract a wider audience, much like the Hollywood revisionist film Walking Tall, its plot and characters are entirely fictional. Leif Garrett also starred in the 3 Walking Tall films.
And again, although it's widely assumed, and we said earlier, that the film is set in Macon County, Georgia or Tennessee, it actually appears to take place in Texas because Chris and Wayne pick up Jenny in Louisiana and agree to drive her home to Dallas. There's no Macon County in Texas, but there is or was a tiny town called Macon, Texas, about halfway between Dallas and Shreveport, Louisiana. And its population began to decline after World War II. By 1985, only a church, a cemetery, and a few scattered houses remained. And the really, really nice car that the brothers drive in the movie is a 1949 Chrysler Town and Country convertible. Only 993 of these were built at a base price of $3,765, which obviously is a lot more in today's money. In excellent condition, at an auction in 2018, or even today, that car would sell for over $100,000.
The music chosen for this film has an interesting backstory as well. The producers knew that they wanted to convey the mood of the scenes in which they were set. The early temp track included Deep Purple by Earl Bostic in the opening sequence, which was replaced by Shaboom in the final film. Smack Dab in the Middle by the Mills Brothers, which was replaced by Jim Dandy to the Rescue, and Jambalaya by Hank Williams, which would be replaced by Keep On Keepin' On. The problem was the original music that they had hoped to use wasn't cleared, and the costs were more than the production could handle. The producers hoped that they could get their distributor to cover the costs, but AIP basically said that that's on you to fix this. But they were able to get a $30,000 bank loan, which was enough to clear the 3 songs that do appear in the final cut, and to hire composer Stu Phillips to compose a new score to replace the canned music that had appeared on the temp track. They still needed a big song for the close, so Roger Camras called Bobby Gentry, whom he had previously dated, and they worked out a deal where if she saw the film and liked it, she would compose a song for it. And that's how they got Another Place, Another Time.
I guess it was a happy breakup. Macon County Line was released on August 8, 1974 in the United States. Not in all cities, of course. The movie was retitled Killing Time in the United Kingdom. AIP offered to send theater owners copies of that Bobby Gentry single, Another Time, Another Place, so they could send it to local DJs to promote the movie. They also suggested capitalizing on the current nostalgia craze in a number of ways. One, by having DJs promote a 50s fashion night at a special performance of the film, with prizes going to the best dressed couple. And they encouraged those theaters to park a 50s era car in front of the theater to attract interest, or to have a threesome of young people, 2 guys and a girl, drive the car down Main Street or to shopping centers, wherever, for added exposure.
Being an acquired title for AIP, Macon County Line didn't really fit into one of the established genres that they had been known for, so they had trouble figuring out the best way to market the film. Generally, their films were marketed before production would even begin, so they had this finished film and had to figure out what to do with it, and it took some time before they finally worked out how to promote it. Some of the taglines that they did come up with include, "It was the fall of '54, a time when laughing was easy, and laugh they did until they crossed the Macon County line.
They're on the bad side of the wrong man.
Whatever you do, don't cross the Macon County line."
Meet Sheriff Reed Morgan. He doesn't like punk kids, strangers, or smart alecks from up north. Chris and Wayne were all 3, and they had crossed the Macon County line.
It shouldn't have happened. It couldn't have happened. But it did.
No, it didn't.
Didn't?
It's not a true story. A blurb in Box Office Magazine after the film's release reported that Macon County Line had grossed more than $3.6 million in 2 weeks, with showings in 352 theaters. This smashes all AIP records, reported the article, adding, and the figure will be even higher when some unreported grosses are added in. This is more remarkable considering that the showings were concentrated in only 5 areas: Atlanta, Charlotte, Dallas, New Orleans, and Washington. So that article was published in July of 1974, so I think that was probably a pre-release before the wide release in August.
On December 12, 1975, Daily Variety announced that Macon County Line was the highest-grossing film in AIP's history, earning $35 million in domestic box office receipts and $11 million in domestic film rentals. According to the January 16, 1975 New York Times review, the picture had already grossed $8 million before it opened in New York City. The film received mixed, generally positive reviews, and brothers Alan Vint and Jesse Vint were widely acclaimed for their performances.
And the film's production budget of $225,000, which doesn't count what it cost to distribute the film, made it reportedly the single most profitable film of 1974, that's of all movies, not just AIP movies, in cost-to-gross ratio. It earned $18.8 million in North America and over $30 million worldwide. It was the largest grossing film per dollar invested of all time, and it retained that title until the release of The Blair Witch Project in 1999.
Return to Macon County, a semi-sequel to this film, also written and directed by Richard Compton, released in 1975, starred Nick Nolte and Don Johnson. Samuel Arkoff got a Presents credit on that film, and despite having nothing to do with the film, Baer had profit participation according to Box Office. Macon County Line is one of several so-called drive-in flicks that were presented as true stories, a la The Legend of Boggy Creek, 1972, Walking Tall, 1973, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974, and Jackson County Jail, 1976, and The Town That Dreaded Sundown, 1976. In each case, most, if not all, of what was portrayed on the screen was outright fiction, with the exception of The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which took inspiration from the Phantom Killer murders in Texarkana, Texas in 1946, and then embellished the actual murders to make them more cinematic.
Macon County Line earned $10 million in rentals in North America. Anchor Bay released the film on both VHS and DVD in February of 2000. The DVD release included an audio commentary with director Richard Compton and the featurette Macon County Line, 25 Years Down the Road.
And both of those extras also appear on the Shout Select Blu-ray edition of Macon County Line from Shout Factory.
So let's talk about where we've seen the Macon County Line cast and other AIP productions. Alan Vint, who played Chris Dixon, was in The Unholy Rollers in 1972.
Cheryl Waters, who portrayed Jenny Scott, would next appear in Rape Squad, aka Act of Vengeance, in 1974.
Max Baer Jr., who was Deputy Reed Morgan, would go on to appear in The Wild McCulloughs in 1975, which he also produced.
Geoffrey Lewis, who played Hamp, had previously appeared in Dillinger the year before, 1973.
And Jesse Vint, the other Dixon boy, Wayne, would go on to appear in Bobby Joe and the Outlaw in 1976.
Timothy Scott, who played Lon Hawkins, also appeared in The Wild McCulloughs in 1975.
Along with James Gammon, who played Elisha Gibbons. Apparently the two of them were very good friends and appeared in a lot of things together. He was in The Wild McCulloughs in 1975 and also would go on to be in Bobby Joe and the Outlaw in 1976.
Leif Garrett, who played Luke Morgan, had appeared in the 3 Walking Tall films. The first, released in 1973 by Cinerama Releasing, would be re-released by AIP in 1974. Part 2, Walking Tall, came out in 1975, and final chapter, Walking Tall, in 1977.
He also became quite the teen idol, as we all know. Doodles Weaver, who played Augie, had appeared in Hot Rod Gang way back in 1958, and was also one of the cast of The Wild McCulloughs in 1975, and that same year he appeared in Six Pack Annie.
Jay Adler, who played the Impound Yard Man, had appeared in Runaway Daughters back in 1956.
Producer Roger Camras, who was the man in the car who hit on Jenny, gave himself another cameo in The Wild McCulloughs in 1975.
And finally, Edward Cross, who played Ed, and I'm not sure who Ed was. I think he might have been in the diner at the beginning.
We never mentioned him. He's probably the guy who's at the cash register complaining.
Maybe we'll find him when we get around to discussing Foxy Brown from 1974. So, Cheryl, I think that's all we have on Macon County Line, except for our own opinions. So using our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic, how do you rate Macon County Line?
Watching this movie, I started to wonder, could it be that AIP attached its name to a genuinely good movie? Not only did Macon County Line get good reviews, it did exceedingly well at the box office. Should we even be talking about this movie? So many of AIP's films land in the so bad it's good bucket, and a good many more qualify as just plain bad. So I enjoyed the unfamiliar sensation of watching a movie for this podcast that had so much going for it. For starters, I thought the story was very well thought out. At the beginning of the film, the audience feels like it's looking at a rollicking road trip, as 2 rowdy Randy brothers from up north shag and steal their way through some southern burgs, picking up a game female companion along the way. But it's not long before the movie turns menacing. The beauty of the script, though, is in how subtly the tide turns against the 3. And that menace, believe it or not, is delivered by Jethro Bodine. If anyone listening grew up watching the Beverly Hillbillies like I did, you may have written Max Baer off as an actor. Jethro, the character, may have been an entertaining lunk-headed hayseed, but he was still a lunk-headed hayseed. I would have been hard-pressed to imagine Jethro, or Max Baer, portraying as nuanced a character as he does here. Not only that, but he co-wrote the script, so we have him to thank for this story, at least in part. Baer plays Morgan as a person who absolutely believes in his own goodness, without dwelling at all on how that goodness is reserved for only the people that he believes are like him. For outsiders, whether it's a couple of northern kids or black folks, well, Deputy Reed has an entirely different persona. And Baer does a stellar job of playing both sides of Morgan without a trace of cognitive dissonance between the two. There are other great performances in the movie too, notably Geoffrey Lewis, who is an absolute delight as Hamp. As we said from the director's commentary, he improvised a lot of the stage business and some of his dialogue, and he is just wonderful. I think the Vint brothers are also good, not as good as Baer or Lewis, but they have to carry a big portion of the film and they have to make us care about them, and they do that very effectively. Their characters aren't great guys, but they're also not bad guys, and they certainly didn't deserve what happened to them. Sam Gilman as Deputy Bill is also very good in this, and though James Gammon and Timothy Scott were despicable, creepy criminals in the movie, I thought they were very good at being criminally creepy. I also thought the film was beautifully shot, especially the scenes where Chris and Wayne are walking out to the impound lot to retrieve their car. That scene was filmed on a road as the sun rose behind them, and the light and the color perfectly represent the hopefulness the brothers and we in the audience feel at the beginning of the movie. I also think Compton did a great job of location scouting. I really thought it was set in the South and was surprised to find out it was in California. That shows how much I know. Now, it's not a perfect film, of course. The film's two contrivances, the pretense that it's based on a true story and the twist ending, I don't really think they're necessary, and they kind of detract from what is otherwise a gripping and tragic story. I think if they had found a way to work around the plot's conveniences where the killers, Wayne, Chris, and Jenny all stop at the same house on the same night at the very same time, it could have been a stronger script. I think there was a way to rework the ending of the script so that Reed came on the boat to kill Wayne and Jenny, just like we expected he would, and then have Luke kill his dad. I think that would give us a shocking ending, but they wouldn't go full M. Night Shyamalan, where they deliver a twist ending just for the sake of having a twist. Still, I very much enjoyed the trip to Macon County Line. I think the story will stay with me a long time, as sad as it is. And I think that's a good thing. I'm giving this an A. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, to me, Macon County Line feels very much like a product of the 70s. And that's not to say that it's dated. The films of the 70s just have a unique style and feel to them that had been lost in the era of home video. Placing the setting of the film in the 1950s doesn't change that. This story could just as easily have been set in the 70s, and very little would have had to have been changed. It's my understanding that the only reason this is set in the 50s was to add production value to a very, very low-budget film. They were able to acquire a bunch of older cars fairly inexpensively. It would be the equivalent of gathering cars from 1999 to 2000 today, and this, along with the soundtrack, helped to recreate the time frame, which is the setting for Macon County Line. Now, when I said that the movies of the 70s have their own style, of course there are exceptions, but many of what are considered to be the greater films of the era have a few things in common with Macon County Line. The story starts really slow. The viewer needs to meet and learn about the characters before they're thrown into the drama of the story, and we do this through long stretches of dialogue that usually reveals character, but often does nothing to advance the plot itself. To put this into perspective, it's a device that today's viewer would seldom have the patience for, though Quentin Tarantino frequently uses this device, only instead of the characters telling dry tales of what they did last week, he spices up the dialogue with references to pop culture, which makes it more interesting and accessible to a wider audience. And because he was able to notice this device, probably from the hundreds of hours spent watching and studying these films, and then exploit it so successfully in his own material, Tarantino is praised as a great writer. But back to Macon County Line. Now, there are some instances where actions speak louder than words in terms of Chris and Wayne's character development. The opening sequence with the prostitute and the following one at the diner where they dine and ditch and tie the cop cars together certainly gives us some insight into their characters. But we don't really get to know any of their motivations until Chris reveals their story to Jenny after they pick her up. And speaking of Jenny, we never do learn much about her. We know that she's 20 years old, she's going back to her hometown of Dallas, and the reason why she's leaving wherever she was. But that's it, and it really doesn't matter. Jenny is literally just along for the ride. The heart of this movie is the sequence with Hamp at Douglas Lubrication. The first 3 minutes is the dialogue between Hamp and Augie about the potential trade for the Mayer. This does nothing at all to advance the plot, but it does serve two purposes. It gives the viewer insight into Hamp's character, and it drives home the fact to Chris, Wayne, and Jenny, and the viewer, that they are stuck in Hicksville. The entire sequence with the cutaways takes about 12 minutes of screen time, which is a big chunk of an 88-minute movie. And during this time, nothing of import really seems to happen. Yet a lot does happen during this time, when Chris and Wayne attempt to barter with Hamp, After seeing his earlier exchange with Augie, they know this is something he might be open to, and Chris tells Wayne to get the gun. We don't know what's going to happen next. We've only started to learn about these characters, and we don't know what they're capable of. At this point, I still had no idea where the story was going to go, so I felt the same uncertainty Hamp must have felt as the situation unfolded. And this sequence also serves as the official start of the film, as all the pieces are placed in position for the rest of the film to play out. Chris, Wayne, Jenny, Reed, Lon, and Elisha are all in the same place at the same time. Reed, Lon, and Elisha are all given the head start, while the others have to wait for Hamp to jerry-rig the car. But he does this, and by doing so, essentially waves the checkered flag to set the story into motion. Macon County Line has an obvious 3-act structure, with the lines between them clearly delineated. Act 1 is everything that happens before Chris, Wayne, and Jenny arrive at Hamp's. Then Act 2 continues until Reed arrives home with Luke to discover his wife has been murdered, and then we go into Act 3 and the resolution plays out. One thing that struck me about this film was the camera work. There's a lot of interesting camera work going on here. There's a lot of zooms, but they're not intrusive. There's a lot of unusual pans, and they're revealing. And again, it's not jarring the way it's done. It's done very well. I mean, between that and the lighting, this is just an impressive work altogether. The first time I watched the movie, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. But that's my initial reaction to a lot of films made in the 70s. There aren't always happy endings. There may be loose ends. And they're very true to life in that regard. The filmmakers deemed it necessary to add that true story disclaimer at the beginning of the film, but I don't know that that would have affected my feelings of the film. It's difficult to say for sure because I already knew that the story wasn't true before seeing it the first time. But when I watch a movie, I'm already prepared to suspend my disbelief, so even though the circumstance of events rely heavily on coincidence, I may have been okay with that. But after watching this movie 3 times during the past week, once with the commentary track, I found this to be a great little film, and I can certainly see why audiences flock to see it, and I'm sure AIP's distribution experiment didn't hurt with that either. So I'm going to agree with you and give Macon County Line an awesome rating of A.
Great, we agreed.
So it may not have worked out for all the characters involved, but I think that you and I have successfully crossed the Macon County line, and we're going to bring this episode to a close.
Until we return to Macon County, but that's for the future.
Until the next episode, I'm Jeff Markin.
And I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in. Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.